great pleasure to welcome back to the Common Sense Club, the Scott Hennen Show, Congressman John Kline. Congressman, how are you?
I'm just doing great. Real excited to have all these people here in the great state of Minnesota.
It is, and I bumped into folks from all across the heartland of America here, and they're, of course, revved up, fired up, ready to go, and they're important in helping you fight some battles in Congress, aren't they?
They're critical in fighting the battles in Congress. We simply can't do it and tell the American people are educated on what the challenges are and what the potential solutions are. And these people who've come here today have got the passion, the interest, and they're just learning better ways to do that educating, do that communicating. So I'm really, really excited and hope this continues to spread around the country.
Well, we did our part in North Dakota and South Dakota to send you a couple of new fresh members of Congress. How are Rick Berg and the new Congresswoman Kristi Noem from South Dakota doing?
Well, they're doing absolutely outstanding. Rick Berg, of course, is going to be your next senator. He's a buddy of mine. We were just out to dinner together this week. Kristi Noem is on my committee, the Education Workforce Committee. She's a member of the Elected Leadership Council. She is extraordinarily not only capable but skillful and is a real leader. So I'm excited about both of them. The Dakotas just keep up doing that kind of work.
That's great. Well, let's talk about a couple of things. You mentioned the Education Committee, some things you're working on there. First of all, I got a little battle going with the Education Secretary, or should we call him the Education Czar, for President Obama. What's happening there?
Well, I think all of your listeners, everybody would know that No Child Left Behind has not worked. And so it doesn't matter whether I'm talking to Democrats or Republicans, teachers or principals or superintendents, everybody says you've got to fix that law. We're going to have increasing numbers of our schools that are failing to make AYP, and that not only is that a failing grade, but it leads to pretty draconian steps that are mandated by the federal government, by the Secretary of Education. And so we have been working in an extraordinarily bipartisan way. It's not to say that there aren't serious partisan differences to try to find a way to fix that law. And to me and to my side of the aisle, that means if our kids are going to get a better education, we need to get the big hand of the federal government to pull back. We are trying to reduce the huge federal intrusion that came with No Child Left Behind. And a little bit surprisingly, we're getting a fair amount of cooperation from Democrats who have also seen that this is not working and is causing problems that were arguably not anticipated. I'm not suggesting that there weren't good people who were hopeful that No Child Left Behind would work, but clearly it is not. So now the Secretary has decided that Congress isn't doing its job, it's not moving fast enough, and he's going to do through his power to grant waivers, he's going to do through regulation, if you will, what's not being done through law, through statute. And he's getting bipartisan pushback. George Miller, the senior Democrat on the committee with me, is on the other end of the ideological spectrum from me. In fact, we've often joked that when I vote red, he votes green, and then vice versa. But we both are pushing back against the Secretary. This is an overreach on the part of the Secretary and the executive branch. The legislative process will move as it will move, and we need to change the law, not let him, I would say, abuse that power that the law gives him to grant waivers, to put strings on and manipulate education the way he wants it done. So we are having a little bit of a pushing contest right now, and in the end, I think we're going to prevail.
How do you maintain the accountability tenets of No Child Left Behind? Because I think one thing everybody agreed on, conservatives at least, is that there just was not enough accountability, that there was, unfortunately, too many examples of failing school systems and zero accountability for that. And so that was at least one premise of No Child Left Behind that seemed to have some merit. As you say, there's been all kinds of implementation issues and everything else. Are you able to keep some of the accountability measures?
Well, we'll get to the accountability language probably early in the fall. The way we're approaching the Elementary and Secondary Education Act in the House is to take that big bill and break it into probably 5 smaller pieces of legislation. And we've already started that process. We've already moved one through the committee. It was pretty straightforward. We looked at the law, and we looked at the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and saw that there were over 80 separate programs, federal government programs. So we brought forward a bill to eliminate over half of those. That passed through the committee. We'll hope to bring it up on the floor of the House here shortly. And we're going to keep going through that whole process. The accountability piece we'll get to probably last. We'll get to it in the fall. And there we're still fundamentally trying to answer the question, accountable for what, to whom? And I think...
And I guess at that point you want as much as possible the local citizens to have the say without question, and that's where education is strongest as far as accountable to what. It's just making sure that the students are learning, right, and getting better.
Well, that's right, but how do you measure it? No Child Left Behind has this once-a-year test. I suspect that we're going to end up with something different than that. But accountable for the kids' progress will be part of this thing. And accountable to whom, I believe the accountable to whom is not necessarily the Secretary of Education, but it's to parents and teachers and school boards and communities. And there is even some bipartisan support for that notion as well. So we're continuing to move forward. We're going to move legislation at the pace that we can move it. We're going to try to make sure that our parents have more choice. The kids have more opportunity. The kids have quality teachers, effective teachers at the end of this process, and that there is a much smaller federal imprint in this.
I want to ask you a couple of the quick things. Congressman John Kline with us from the RightOnline Conference in downtown Minneapolis. Let's talk a little bit about Libya. You obviously, as a leatherneck, 25-year veteran of this country and a Marine, have more say than most in this situation. Evidently, President Obama says depends on what the definition of a war is. Does the president have an obligation to get congressional authorization?
The president does have an authorization, and even if you take the War Powers Act, which is commonly taken, and administrations, Republican and Democrat, have had issues with that. But it does call for consultation with Congress, and he has neglected to do that. So he has got us in a position where we have American forces committed to a very uncertain mission. It is not clear to our men and women fighting this fight, whether they're in uniform or perhaps they're part of the intelligence community, what's the mission? What's the goal? Are we trying to remove Muammar Gaddafi? Are we trying to protect civilians, which is what the president originally said? And, of course, that raises the question, well, if you're just trying to protect innocent civilians, why aren't you protecting the innocent civilians in Syria and Yemen and other places around the world? So we have insisted, Congress, in a bipartisan way, that the president define what that mission is and get approval from Congress to execute that mission. And he has not done that. Speaker Boehner has been very, very clear in saying that we will not put up with that. So there is a kind of a constitutional clash here, but it's not an academic one. It's a real one. We're spending real money. We have people out there all the time who are engaged.
Are you sure? According to him, there's no conflict, so there's nothing to ask for.
Yeah, but I suspect that if you ask anybody living in Tripoli right now, where the bombs have been raining down, they might say there is a conflict. So, and we're part of that, whether it's our attack planes dropping the bombs or whether we're just providing fuel and command and control and logistical support and backup. We're part of a conflict.
But I mean, the response is staggering when you think about it. I mean, is that not an arrogance of power from the Obama administration?
No, it's remarkable, and it would be laughable, except it's really not funny. It's absurd to say this isn't a conflict and therefore he doesn't have to have congressional approval. Believe me, none of us believe that. And it doesn't matter whether you're a quote hawk or quote dove. We have a constitutional responsibility in Congress, and the president is thwarting that. And again, as Speaker Boehner said, we're just not going to stand for it.
Last question: just how big has government become? Even in your tenure in Congress, the sweep of history seems to be when you talk about an arrogance of power from the Obama administration and what's happening there, and Speaker Pelosi, Harry Reid, and their push. You've got a heck of a freightliner to try and turn around here, don't you?
Well, that's a good way to think of it, or turn the Queen Mary, or whatever that old cliche was. Government is way too big. It's way too intrusive. It's intruded in all corners of our life. And what we're seeing right now, now that the Republicans control the House of Representatives, one third of the arms of government, if you will, the president has realized that he can't get his agenda through statute, through law, can't get it through Congress. So we are seeing a regulatory blizzard. New regulations, new rules, interpretations of rules, and there are some stunning examples of it. One that's filled the front pages now for some time is that the National Labor Relations Board, which is a 3 Democrat, 1 Republican board, the Democrats put in place by President Obama, has decided that Boeing, who has spent over $1 billion building a brand new plant to manufacture their Dreamliners down in South Carolina, hired already over 1,000 people in South Carolina to do this manufacturing, is on track to make that 4,000. The National Labor Relations Board said, no, you can't do that. You've got to build that plant in the state of Washington. Well, why is that? Well, because in Washington, there's a union. And in South Carolina, it's a right-to-work state, and it's not. And I think every American truly ought to be outraged. That is so contrary to everything that we hold dear. Freedom of choice, the chance to make sound business decisions, to put people to work, all being trampled on because there is a very clear overreach in an effort to promote big labor.
What happens if Barack Obama is reelected in November of 2012? What's at stake?
That's a terrifying thought right now. There is a lot at stake. I think that the pundits would say that Republicans are likely to gain control of the Senate. That would be very helpful. Keep control in the House. There'll be a lot of hard-fought battles because of redistricting and so forth. But we really, really need to get President Obama out of the White House. His agenda is killing jobs. He's one of the last Keynesian economics advocates left in the world, I suppose, where he believes that more government spending is the way that you stimulate the economy. That has clearly not worked. Where he had the stimulus bill, we spent almost $1 trillion. We're running unemployment still over 9%. I don't see any light there in either foreign policy or domestic policy. I don't see any opportunity for the economy to grow and Americans to get back to work when he's in the White House.
Congressman Kline, thanks for the time.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Okay.